The sun hung low over the rolling hills of West Texas like a bruised peach, casting long shadows across the dry grass and the weathered boards of Clara Sutton's small cabin. It was the summer of 1878, and the frontier was still a place where mercy could be as dangerous as malice. Clara had lived alone since her husband, Tom, died 2 winters back from fever, leaving her with a patch of land. She was 32, strong from years of hard work, with hair the color of sun-bleached corn and eyes that had seen too much to flinch easily. The Comanche raids had lessened in recent years as the army pushed deeper into their lands, but the fear lingered like smoke after a grass fire. Folks in the nearest town, 20 miles east, still spoke of burned homesteads and taken children. Clara didn't speak of it much. She just kept her doors barred and her powder dry. That afternoon she had been mending a fence near the creek when she heard the distant thunder of hooves, not the steady rhythm of cattle, but the frantic gallop of men in pursuit. She crouched behind a cottonwood, watching as a posse of 8 riders swept past on lathered horses, shouting and firing into the brush. They were townsmen mostly, faces she recognized from the general store, the blacksmith, the saloon keeper, a couple of ranch hands. Leading them was Harlan Crow, a cattle baron with a grudge against anything that wore feathers or carried a lance. They were hunting a Comanche warrior, they yelled, said he'd stolen horses and knifed a drover near the Red River 2 days before. Clara stayed hidden until the dust settled, then walked the way they'd come, curious despite herself. She found him half a mile from her barn, sprawled in a shallow gully behind a cluster of scrub oak. He was young, perhaps 25, his long black hair matted with blood and dirt, his buckskin leggings torn where a bullet had grazed his thigh. A deeper wound wept red from his side, just below the ribs, likely from a rifle slug that had passed clean through. A bow lay broken beside him, arrows scattered like spilled kindling. His face was painted with streaks of ochre and black, but the paint was cracking, running with sweat. He wore a single eagle feather in his hair, now bent and soiled. Clara knelt, her shadow falling over him. His eyes opened, dark, fever-bright, and fixed on her with a mixture of defiance and exhaustion. He tried to reach for the knife at his belt, but his hand trembled and fell away. She should have walked back to the cabin, barred the door, and waited for the posse to return triumphant. That would have been the safe thing, the expected thing. Instead, she looked at the man bleeding into her dirt and felt something stir, pity, perhaps, or the memory of Tom dying slow while she could do nothing but hold his hand. Or maybe it was simply that she was tired of death claiming everything on this land. Whatever it was, she made her choice. "Come on," she whispered, though he likely didn't understand the words. She slipped her shoulder under his arm, ignoring the hot slickness of blood against her blouse. He was heavier than he looked, all lean muscle and bone, but he didn't fight her. Perhaps he was too weak, or perhaps he sensed she meant no harm. The posse might circle back. She couldn't risk the cabin yet. Inside the dim, hay-scented space, she laid him on a blanket she'd kept for sick calves. He groaned as she settled him. Clara worked quickly. She fetched water from the well, tore strips from an old sheet for bandages, and built a small fire in a tin bucket to boil her knife. The wound in his side was ugly, jagged entry, ragged exit, but it hadn't hit anything vital. She cleaned it as best she could with whiskey from Tom's old flask, biting her lip against the smell of burnt flesh as she cauterized the edges to stop the bleeding. He clenched his jaw, fists balled in the hay. When she stitched the gash with thread boiled clean, he watched her hands with a strange intensity. She wrapped his thigh next, the bullet graze shallow but festering. All the while, she spoke softly, about the weather, the cattle, anything to fill the silence. She didn't know if he understood English, but the tone seemed to calm him. By dusk, the fever had set in. He tossed, murmuring words she didn't know, his skin burning under her palm. Clara stayed with him through the night, changing compresses of cool creek water on his brow. She kept the barn door cracked, listening for hoofbeats. Twice she thought she heard riders in the distance, but the wind played tricks. He lifted a hand, touched her wrist lightly, gratitude perhaps, or warning. Then he spoke, low and hoarse. "Peta." She didn't know what it meant, Morning came gray and heavy with the threat of rain. Clara stepped outside to check the horizon and froze. The posse had returned. 8 riders, Harlan Crow in the lead, sat their horses at the edge of her yard. They had circled wide, cutting sign. "Ms. Sutton," Crow called, voice carrying like gravel. "We tracked blood to your land. Seen a Comanche buck come this way last evening." Clara stood on the porch, rifle cradled in her arms. Not aimed, but ready. "Seen nothing but dust and my own cattle, Mr. Crow. If there's a man bleeding out there, he's not in my barn or my house." Crow squinted, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Mind if we look around?" She smiled thinly. "Mind a great deal. This is my land. You come on it armed and searching without leave. That's trespass." The men shifted, uneasy. One muttered about the Comanche killing their friend. Crow raised a hand for silence. "We'll be back with papers if we have to, woman. Don't make this hard." They wheeled their horses and rode off, but Clara knew they weren't gone for good. She returned to the barn, heart hammering. The warrior, Peta, she thought of him now, was awake, propped against the wall, watching her. He had pulled himself up somehow, knife in hand again, but he lowered it when she entered. "They'll come back," she said, more to herself than him. "And if they find you here," he nodded once, understanding more than she thought. Then slowly he reached into a small pouch at his belt and drew out a carved bone pendant, etched with a running horse. He pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it. A gift. A debt. She met his eyes and saw something new there. 2 people caught between worlds, both bleeding in their own way. As the day wore on, she moved him to the root cellar beneath the cabin floor. A hidden space Tom had dug for storing winter vegetables. It was cool, dark, safe from prying eyes. She brought food, water, fresh bandages. Peta grew stronger with each hour, the fever breaking toward evening. He ate what she offered. She felt his gaze like a touch on her back. Night fell, and with it came the sound Clara had dreaded. Many horses, moving quiet but unmistakable. She climbed the ladder from the cellar, rifle in hand, and peered through the shuttered window. The moon was thin, but it showed her enough. Warriors, 20, 30, maybe more. They carried lances, bows, rifles. At their center sat a tall figure in a buffalo robe, watching the house. "Oh." Peta stirred below. He had heard them too. Clara looked down at him through the trapdoor, saw the tension in his face. He knew these men, his people, and they had come for him. She took a deep breath, the weight of the bone pendant heavy against her chest under her blouse. Whatever happened next, she had crossed a line there was no uncrossing. The warriors did not charge. They did not shout war cries or loose arrows into the night. Instead, they formed a loose ring around the cabin at a respectful distance. Each man sitting motionless on his pony, lances upright, faces painted for war, but held in stillness. The moon slid higher, silvering the grass, and Clara could make out details. Feathers tied in braids, metal trade bracelets glinting, the occasional flash of a rifle barrel. At the center of the circle sat the tall man in the buffalo robe. Even from the shutter crack, she could see the authority in his posture, the way the others angled their mounts slightly toward him. This was no raiding party come for vengeance alone. This was a delegation, a judgment, perhaps a rescue. Inside the cabin, Clara lowered the rifle barrel. Her hands shook, not from fear exactly, but from the sheer weight of what she had done. She had hidden an enemy of her people. She had tended his wounds, fed him, spoken to him in the dark hours when fever made him delirious. And now his kin had come, and the posse might return at first light with warrants or worse. Peta had climbed the ladder from the root cellar on his own strength, moving slowly but steadily. The fever was gone. Color had returned to his copper skin. He stood beside her now, close enough that she could smell the faint sage and smoke on him, the clean sweat of healing. He wore only the breech clout and leggings she had mended. He touched her arm lightly and pointed toward the door. His eyes asked the question without words. "Let me go to them." Clara hesitated. If she opened the door and let him walk out, the warriors might take him and leave. Yet if she kept him inside, the standoff could stretch into daylight, and then the posse would arrive to find Comanche surrounding a white woman's house. Blood would follow. Hers, theirs, his. She looked into Peter's face and saw no demand, only waiting. He would abide by whatever she chose. She drew a long breath. "All right," she said softly, "but not alone." She unbarred the door, stepped onto the porch with the rifle in the crook of her arm, not raised but visible. Peter followed, limping only slightly, bare-chested in the cool night air. The moment they appeared, a low murmur rippled through the circle of riders. Several ponies shifted, restless. The man in the buffalo robe raised one hand, palm out, and silence returned. Clara spoke first, voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. "He's hurt, but healing. I didn't turn him over to the posse. I won't turn him over to you either unless that's what he wants." The tall man dismounted with deliberate grace. He was older, perhaps 50. His face seamed with scars and wisdom, hair streaked with gray and braided with otter fur. He carried no weapon in his hands, though a sheathed knife hung at his hip. He walked forward alone until he stood perhaps 20 paces from the porch. The other warriors held position. "I am Quanah," he said in clear, accented English. "This man is my sister's son. His name is Peta na Kwai, but he carries the name Peta among those who speak the white tongue." Clara felt Peta stiffen beside her. She glanced at him. His gaze was locked on the older man, a mixture of respect and something deeper, relief, perhaps shame. Quanah continued. "We followed his trail after the fight at the crossing. We found blood, then no blood. Then we found the tracks of many white men circling, searching. And then we found your house." His eyes moved over Clara, measuring. "You could have given him up for reward. You could have let him die in the gully. Instead, you brought him here and cared for him. Why?" "Because he was bleeding," she said simply. "And I know what it is to watch someone bleed and be able to do nothing. My husband died that way." A long silence followed. Quanah studied her, then shifted his gaze to Peta. The younger man stepped forward, placed his right fist over his heart and spoke in Comanche. Clara caught only fragments. Her name, repeated twice, and the word for woman, paired with something that sounded like gratitude. When he finished, he bowed his head slightly. Quanah listened without expression. Then he turned back to Clara. "My nephew says you saved his life. He says you spoke to him when the fever burned, that you gave him water and meat when he could not ask. He says you stood against your own people to keep him hidden. He says he owes you a life." Clara shook her head. "I don't want payment. I just want no more killing here tonight." Quanah's mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. "No more killing tonight," he agreed. "But the white men will come again. They want blood for their dead drover. They will not believe he acted alone." "I know," Clara said. Quanah considered her for another long moment. Then he reached inside his robe and drew out a small bundle wrapped in soft hide. He stepped closer. "Take this," he said. "It is not payment. It is a promise. If ever you are in need, show this to any of our people. They will know it comes from Quanah, and they will help you as you helped my nephew." Clara accepted the bundle. Inside was a small medicine shield, no larger than her palm, tanned deer hide stretched over a willow hoop, painted with a red handprint and 4 black stars. "Thank you," she said. Quanah nodded once. He looked at Peta again, spoke a few quiet words in their language. Peta answered, voice firm. Quanah's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "My nephew asks to stay one more night," Quanah said to Clara, "to regain more strength before the journey home. He says he will not bring trouble to your door. I believe him. Do you allow it?" Clara looked at Peta. His eyes were steady, calm. She nodded. "One more night." Quanah turned, raised his hand to the waiting warriors. A signal passed, ponies wheeled, riders fell into a loose column. They did not ride away immediately. Instead, they circled once around the cabin. Slow, deliberate. A gesture Clara later learned was both salute and ward. Clara and Peta stood on the porch until the last shadow vanished. She felt suddenly exhausted, the night's tension draining out of her like water from a cracked bucket. Peta touched her shoulder. "Inside," he said, the word clear in English. His voice was low, rough from disuse. They went in. She barred the door again, though the need felt less urgent now. Peta lowered himself onto the bench by the hearth. Clara built up the fire, set coffee to boil, sliced cornbread and cold venison. They ate in silence at first, the crackle of the flames the only sound. Then Peta spoke. Danger. For me." "I knew the risk," she answered. "Why?" She looked into the fire. He studied her profile. After a moment he reached out, took her hand, the one that still wore the faint stain of his blood from yesterday. He turned it palm up, traced the lifeline with one finger. Then he placed his own palm against hers, pressing lightly. Skin to skin, heat to heat. "Tomorrow," he said, "I go." She nodded, throat tight. Tomorrow. They did not speak of what came after. Instead, they sat through the small hours, firelight painting their faces in shifting gold. When exhaustion finally pulled at them, Clara offered him the narrow bed in the corner. He refused, spreading a blanket on the floorboards near the hearth. She took the bed, leaving the door to the root cellar open in case he needed anything in the night. Dawn arrived soft and gray. Clara rose first, made biscuits, fried salt pork. Peta ate standing, already dressed in the shirt and vest she had washed and mended. His wounds were scabbed, movement easier. Outside, the world waited, empty prairie, distant cattle lowing, no sign of warriors or posse. He stepped to the door, paused, turned back. "Clara," he said, her name careful, accented, but sure. She crossed to him. He lifted the bone pendant she still wore around her neck, the one he had given her that first day, and touched it, then touched his own chest over his heart. "Always," he said. She understood. He stepped out, walked to the barn, retrieved his bow, restrung now with sinew she had found, and a handful of arrows she had fletched for him while he slept. He mounted one of her gentler horses, a bay mare she rarely rode. She watched from the porch as he rode east toward the low hills, the rising sun gilding his shoulders. He did not look back. Hours later, the posse arrived, Harlan Crow and 6 others, faces grim. They found no blood trail, no sign of an Indian in the barn or house. Clara met them on the porch, calm, rifle leaning against the doorframe. "Still nothing, gentlemen," she said. "Must have kept running." Crow glared, suspicious, but they had no proof. Weeks passed, then months. Clara worked her land, mended fences, drove cattle to market. She kept the medicine shield wrapped in oilcloth in her trunk, never spoke of that night. But sometimes, riding the fence line at dusk, she would see a single rider on a distant ridge, too far to recognize, yet something in the seat, the way the horse moved, made her heart lift. One spring morning 2 years later, she found a small bundle on her porch, fresh venison haunch wrapped in soft hide, tied with sinew. She smiled, placed the feather beside the medicine shield, and somewhere out on the llano, a man with a scarred side and a bone pendant around his neck looked toward the east, toward a cabin under cottonwoods, and knew the debt was not paid in full, but honored, always.